It ain't the left side or the right side, then it must be the FinSide. It ain't the left side.
Thank you, Solo D. Welcome to another episode of On the FinSide here with Kat and Paul. Follow us on Facebook, Twitter, Spreaker, iTunes, YouTube, iHeartRadio, and Spotify. The Dolphins face off against the Washington Redskins this coming weekend. 0-5 against 0-5 at Hard Rock Stadium, noon Central, 1 Eastern. The Redskins, believe it or not, are favored in this game by 3.5 points. Well, some people can believe it. I was a little bit surprised still. But, Paul, when I look at this roster, both rosters, and I look at this game, when you take a look at what happened in Washington this past week, it seems like the Dolphins are the normal team heading into this weekend.
Completely is. Jay Gruden gets fired on Monday. I mean, after joking around in his post-game press conference last week about, like, well, he'd still be the coach if his keys worked when he came into work on Monday. And newsflash, they didn't. So Bill Callahan takes over and, in surprising fashion, gets up on the podium, says he's not going to start Dwayne Haskins. Basically says that the Redskins ran the least of any team he's ever been around, and yet they were running the ball at an alarming rate, just ineffectively for the most part, and promotes Kevin O'Connell not just to his offensive coordinator, but also the one calling the plays, someone who is a hot young assistant, but has never really called plays in the past. And this is after the Redskins have been a team that makes probably even worse halftime adjustments than Miami. Miami's been getting blown out despite being competitive in the first halves against some pretty good teams overall. And the Redskins, while they've played some good teams, have also played some bad ones. And while they may have put up more touchdowns than the Dolphins this season, they've made terrible halftime adjustments and gotten blown out in the second half as well. Miami's got a bye week to prepare for these guys. The coaching staff's trying to win. And really, this seems a damn mess. And, you know, Kevin O'Connell calling plays, someone who's never called plays before, it's not as easy as some people think it is. It's not just pausing Madden and you know, flipping through your playbook. It's something where you have a true time crunch. So the fact that they're not dedicated to Haskins, it could be interesting in this one.
They're doing the one thing at quarterback with a rookie quarterback I completely disagree with. I am fine with sitting a rookie quarterback on the bench. I'm fine with playing him immediately. I'm fine putting him in game 3 like Baker Mayfield was put in last year for the Browns. But what I can't stand is when you sit him at the beginning of the year, then you throw him in the middle of a game. He has a 3-interception performance against the Giants a couple weeks ago. Then you take him back out, you switch coaches, you switch coordinators, and now you don't even give him a chance to redeem himself. I'm sure he will at some point this year at least get that opportunity, but it looks like they're starting to ruin this guy before he even gets his feet on the ground. Not a good way to handle the quarterback position. Case Keenum is going to start in this game, Paul. A lot of people don't know this. Case Keenum has more passing yards in college football history than anybody in the history of college football by about 2,000 yards. And he's been productive in the NFL. And actually, the first couple of games, Case Keenum did pretty well, and the Redskins were moving the football, but they did not end up winning those games. And looking at their running game, I think the Dolphins have an opportunity to make the Redskins pretty one-dimensional right up front because, like you said, Adrian Peterson, just a shell of his former self. I mean, he's almost as old as Frank Gore at this point. 40 carries for 108 yards, 2.7 yards per carry on this year. The Dolphins looked much, much better in the last game against the Chargers against the run. Austin Eckler just 18 carries for 60 yards. And lately, Paul, it seems like on defense, the Dolphins' strength is at their run defense with Raekwon McMillan and Davin Gotcha having very good seasons so far.
It completely is. And not only the fact that the Redskins' rushing attack has been anemic and ineffective despite their dedication to it. You know, you've got Case Keenum, who I believe had roughly 68.5% passing or completion percentage. You're getting him back, and then you're rededicating yourself to the running game instead. And you need a running back to do that. And, you know, basically Peterson and the rest of that stable combined to make a mediocrely ineffective running back. So It's just a recipe for disaster. As you pointed out before, this is a franchise that, while not everyone agrees with what Miami's doing, at least they have a clear-cut, concise plan. The Redskins are running around like the robot from the old Lost in Space, swinging their arms about, screaming, "Danger, Will Robinson." And God, it's just disgusting to watch. Trent Williams doesn't want to play for them. Their line's a mess. Their backfield's a mess. And they have no hope in sight in the foreseeable future.
Yeah, they don't. And if you don't believe us, take a look at our interview with our Redskins guest, Ken, from First Amendment Sports. I mean, he was talking about Trent Williams is the best player in the Washington Redskins, and he does flat out doesn't want to play for him. He could, but he doesn't want to because it goes back to a medical problem where he feels that the team lied to him. And Trent Williams, if you look at him historically, is not a guy that just throws his hands up and causes fits. So we'll see about that. But yeah, one of these teams needs to get back on track. Another interesting matchup too is going to be out in the boundary with Terry McLaurin against Xavier Howard. Howard had a much better game than he did against Dallas. How could he not? But this kid, Terry McLaurin, might end up on a bad Redskins team being Offensive Player of the Year. And their second option in the passing game underneath is going to be Chris Thompson. 25 catches for 268 yards, a real good dump-off option that can make people miss there after the catch. So I expect Jerome Baker to be tested after this game or during this game. And he needs to be too, because Jerome Baker is not off to a very good start this year and ruffled a few feathers this past week by saying you're not a real fan if you are rooting for this tank. I'm sure I don't have the exact verbiage on that, but yeah, I mean, defensively, Jerome Baker needs a big game for a couple of reasons.
He does, but you know what? I want to address this whole "you're not a real fan if you're rooting for the team to lose." I'm not pissed at him for it. It's yeah, he does need a good game, but I don't blame him because they are out there trying to win. He may not be as effective as we expected to see from him this season, but again, if I were on a team, and this is somebody that played growing up and coaches youth football now, and I found out one of our parents was rooting for us to lose so that we got a different matchup in the playoffs or anything along those lines, I'd be pissed too. It's I don't care who I face. I don't care, and I understand this for Jerome Baker too. You want to win, and you want the people rooting for you to cheer for you to win. And it doesn't feel like they're rooting for you or your team if they're rooting for you to lose, even if they're looking at the long-term picture with that. I totally understand where he's coming from. He wants the fans to want them to win. He wants to win. Let's lay off him on that respect and just get on his ass about what he's doing on the field, because let's face it, right now he's helping the Dolphins tank.
That's true. And yeah, I don't really have a problem with what Baker said. I mean, the truth is, I don't proactively root for the Dolphins to lose, but I have accepted the reality a long time ago that they're not going to be very good this year. And that's the direction they're headed. And I'm not clapping my hands when they're getting their ass kicked, but afterward, I feel that I can evaluate and say what I damn well please. And the reality is, I don't really care that much if they go 1-15 or 3-13, other than 1-15 might get them the number one pick in the draft. Sorry, that matters to me, and I'd be willing to kneel out 11 more games based on that. Some people feel differently. I'm sorry. I've accepted that reality that the Dolphins weren't going to be good this year anyway. But I still like Jerome Baker. He's entitled to his opinion, and it comes from a place of passion. I do like that as well. So looking at the rest of the team here, the Dolphins on offense, this could be a very good game here for Josh Rosen. When you look at the Redskins pass defense on the year to opposing quarterbacks, the Redskins are allowing 74.7% of passes to get completed and allowing 110 quarterback rating. Now, the big difference in this, I think Montez Sweat and Ryan Kerrigan, they're two very talented players, but haven't put up big sack numbers yet, or ripe for a breakout game here against the Dolphins offensive line. And it seems to be a constant theme every week here.
It is. I mean, and that's what comes from starting a rookie guard at left tackle. That's what comes from starting whoever they sign this week at right tackle, which automatically gives you a depleted set of bookends. And, you know, you look at the middle of the line, there are a lot of serviceable pieces on this line. There are the core elements to build a line for the future already on this line. But there are some weak spots, and if you've got one or two weak spots in an offensive line, the whole line is weak. And that's where Miami's at right now. So, yes, the opportunity is there. Miami needs to get to that quick strike offense. We need to get Albert Wilson back. We need to start pumping the underneath and getting the run game going to alleviate some of that pressure on a line that has some weak spots. So if Miami can do that in this one, it could be a very electric game for Josh Rosen. He's shown a lot of ability, and he's shown some improvement already in just a couple of weeks. Miami's committed to him as the starter for the rest of this season. So we're going to get the opportunity without the pressure of Fitzpatrick breathing down his neck. So, yeah, this is a good opportunity to see a relaxed Josh Rosen out there leading this team. And I'm just looking for improvement from him. I mean, the path of least resistance for this guy, and I know not everybody agrees, is to be successful and put Miami in that predicament where if Miami does have the number one or number two or number three overall pick, maybe that's not one looking at a quarterback if Josh Rosen can show enough improvement, especially with this depleted offense.
Yeah, you hit the nail on the head right there. I mean, to me, I look at this season as a win-win now because I do accept the reality that I don't think the Dolphins are going to win more than a few games. But if they do, it's because Josh Rosen took this roster kicking and screaming 2, 3, 4, 5 wins, and now Tua is not going to be the franchise quarterback of the team because you've won too many games. I view that as a good thing if that were to happen, but also if he doesn't, having the number one pick and drafting a quarterback, maybe it's Tua, that could give you an opportunity to have two quarterbacks that are young to look forward to. But the way I look at this game now is, and the way I've looked at the last couple of games is, Josh Rosen has played very well the last two games in the first half against the Cowboys and against the Chargers. Not great, but very good. And then in the third quarter, what tends to happen is then the opposing quarterback for the other team. I mean, we faced good ones: Lamar Jackson, Tom Brady, Phillip Rivers, Dak Prescott, all very good quarterbacks who had no pass rush on them. And at a certain point, completing 80% of passes for these quarterbacks, eventually they get up 2 scores, and then the opposing defense tees off on Josh Rosen. That may not happen this game. If the Dolphins can start out in the first half like they did the last couple of weeks, then and get the running game going, block downhill, take some pressure off the offensive line, and be winning this game heading into halftime, then the Redskins may not have the firepower to just snap their fingers and turn it around and make it a 2-score game.
No, and the Redskins aren't a team that's making halftime adjustments thus far this season. So really, they're not a team that's going to just come out and completely adjust in the second half, barring some miracle, which Bill Callahan has not shown in his history. Kevin O'Connell has no history. So we're not seeing a team that screams, we make halftime adjustments. I mean, the biggest thing for Miami in this game, in all honesty, is Preston Williams, Jakeem Grant, Mike Gesicki. Everybody needs to get over the damn dropsies. Miami's a few dropsies away from not becoming one-dimensional, keeping themselves in games. And that's been Miami's biggest Achilles heel thus far, is the fact that they've had dropsies or, what's-his-face, ducking below passes. The balls have been there to keep Miami in games, to keep them from getting one-dimensional, from keeping the defenses from being able to pin their ears back. If Miami can get over the dropsies in this one, it could be a fun game.
Yeah, what's his name is exactly right. That's what I think of Kalen Balazs right now. And I like that Mark Walton. I hope he gets a lot more action in this game. I hope he is that second running back, and I think he will be based on everything that I've heard. So another thing that Ken Marangolo said in the interview, and be sure to listen to that, listeners, as well. It was a great interview with him about the Redskins roster, is that opposing receivers are getting yards out there on Josh Norman, a former Pro Bowl cornerback, quote, at will. And we only reference PFF on this show if it really, really sticks out. Josh Norman's ranking there is right around 45. So, 30-year-old cornerback, losing a step. This is a game that Preston Williams could have a huge confidence booster if he gets matched one-on-one against him, because it is a former Pro Bowl cornerback. And if he can make some big catches and the Dolphins come out with a win, the arrow's really pointing up for Preston at that point.
It is, and Josh Norman's best friend and best defense in this game may be Preston Williams' hands. It's sad to say based on the ability we've seen from him at times. But Norman can't cover a paper bag right now. I hope Devontae Parker ends up matched up on him from what we've seen from him thus far. I never thought I'd be saying those words. And I hope Jakeem Grant gets matched up on a little bit and can get some confidence built there, because Jakeem Grant is a guy that is absolutely electric if he can get himself rolling this season, which we haven't seen thus far. And Jakeem Grant can do some special things and make some people look stupid when he is up to par.
Yeah, he needs a big breakout game. And also Albert Wilson, as of right now, is supposed to play in this game. That'll be big. He should be matched up in the slot a lot with Fabian Moreau. On the outside, we should see Quentin Dunbar, who's been a really big piece of the Redskins puzzle in the second so far. Their best defensive back so far this year. And also in the middle of the field, 6'2", 220-pound Monte Nicholas. They've got back this year. Man, for a big guy, that he can run a lot. He's not an athlete that you see from a week-to-week basis. And also in terms of athleticism, a former or the Redskins' other first-round pick, Montez Sweat, is a player that Dolphins fans, a lot of them wanted the Dolphins to take there at 13 instead of Christian Wilkins. So a couple of other side notes there. But, Paul, also let's look at the rest of the teams picking really in the top 8 that we can take a look at. The Bengals, right now, if the season ended today, they would have the number 1 pick. They play at Baltimore, who's 3-2, pretty heavy underdog there. The Redskins would pick 2nd. The Dolphins would pick 3rd. Those damn Jets, 0-4, they would pick 4th, and they play against Dallas, who are 3-2. It looks like more of a bounce-back game for Dallas. The Dolphins would then pick 5th again, because the Pittsburgh Steelers are 1-4, and Mason Rudolph not expected to play in this game. Delvin Hodges should start against the Chargers on Sunday Night Football. We're probably going to be recording our show on Sunday night when that game is going on, because the truth is, if the Steelers lose that game, they're going to stay picking at least 5th. They lose to the Chargers, they go to 1-6, and then they've got the Dolphins, and one of those teams has to win. But it's looking more and more likely, unless something really turns around, that the Dolphins may have 2 picks in the top 5 and 2 picks in the top 10. Almost look like a lock at this point.
You know, just the scenario that I keep looking at as I'm looking at these picks, and this is if Miami doesn't get the number 1 overall, which Miami's got some tests to get the number 1 pick. They've still got 2 games against the Jets coming up later this year. How cool would it be for Miami to have back-to-back picks in the top 5? You can do some devastating things that absolutely change the draft board if Miami, say, was picking 3rd and the Steelers 4th instead of 5th. I mean, or Miami was picking 4th and 5th. I mean, you could do some absolutely disgusting things to teams and really just shake up the entirety of the first round of the draft with back-to-back picks.
Yeah, and say the Dolphins pick exactly where they are today, 3rd and 5th, and the Bengals pick 1st. And because I think in that scenario, if Tua's stock is where it is now, I don't think anybody's going to be able to trade up for that, because I think he would be that pick. And that's fine, because I don't want the Dolphins saying, hey, we're going to give you 4 first-rounders to move up 2 spots. I'd rather, at that point, for them to build a well-rounded team. And they could just pluck Chase Young and Jeffrey Okudah off of Ohio State's team, plug them at cornerback and pass rusher. And man, oh man, now you've got a defense that has really solved 2 major and very important defined holes.
You do, and like I've been playing like crazy with mock drafts and things like that already at this point, which is crazy to me, here at the beginning of October. But you look at, and actually before I even get to that, one thing I do want to say, and it's going to be a little bit of a soapbox moment real quick, Kat, and I apologize. The whole tank for Tua thing, and I like Tua. Don't get me wrong. Go ahead and at me if you need to, listeners. But the whole tank for Tua thing is a gigantic assumption. We don't know that the Dolphins are even high on Tua as somebody that fits in what they want to do. We don't know that the Dolphins aren't higher on Fromm or Love or Rosen even, or Burrow, or a number of other quarterbacks out there. They might be ridiculously high on somebody that's projected to go in the 5th round at quarterback for reasons unknown, which is not unheard of. And they may do exactly what you said and build that well-rounded team with the draft capital that they have that lets a quarterback be successful. So we don't know. The tank for Tua thing is an assumption. It's gotten a huge snowball effect at this point. But in reality, tank for Tua is an assumption. We don't even know if Greer and McKenzie and Flores are like, yeah, we love this guy. We got to go get him. We don't know that. Nobody knows that. You know who knows that? Greer, McKenzie, and Flores. Maybe Steve Ross, but I wouldn't tell him shit at this point if I were them.
No, me either. A couple of things there is, number one, I think that it's quite possible that, and likely, if they're good at their jobs, that they don't know yet themselves. I mean, the evaluation still has to play out. I mean, like I've said and it's why we haven't done a draft show, because I don't want to stand up and say Joe Burrow's a great quarterback or Tua is a great quarterback when they've got 3 or 4 of the most important games of their college career still to play here. If Tua, for as much as I've said about him, and I would take him number 1, and I think absolutely 100% at this point, they would take Tua number 1 if they had that pick. But if the Dolphins win 3 games and these teams ahead of them do not, and they pick 4th, Tua's or whatever quarterback is not going to be a Miami Dolphin, and then you have to go really to plan B. So the process still has to play out there. And the second part, and I'll repeat over and over again, the whole tank for Tua, the whole tank in general is a media and a fan thing. Because at the beginning of the year, the Dolphins did nothing different than what they did in 2012. They stayed out of free agency. They got out of a lot of big contracts, and they were trying to reset the engine a little bit. The only difference was they got blown away for Laramie Tunzel. They took it, and then Minka Fitzpatrick, for lack of a better word, quit on this football team, and the Dolphins may end up with a top 5 pick in response. So, yeah, there's a lot of things. But the good news is the Dolphins are going to come out of this with a lot of money and a lot of draft picks, and they're going to be able to put together a lot of players here in a very short period of time over a 2 to 3 year window.
Completely. And I love the fact, and I think you hit the nail on the head. If they're doing their jobs, they're not locked in on anybody. They're still evaluating. And they set themselves up with the capital to be able to build one hell of a team, whether that's Tua, whether that's whoever. They set themselves up to basically not be so successful this season, but I don't think they directly set themselves up to intentionally go 0-16. Basically, they set their roster wherever it fell and said, well, we're going to try to win some games with whatever we've got once we get ourselves set up for 2020. And, if that puts them at number 1 overall and they're in love with Tua, great. If it puts them at number 1 overall and they're in love with Chase Young, great. If it gives them 2 top 10 picks like it looks like it's going to, awesome, even better. They've set themselves up with the resources to be able to do whatever they want at that point in time, which is a point in time we're not at yet.
No, we're certainly not. Where we are is heading into Sunday with the Washington Redskins traveling to Hard Rock Stadium to play the Miami Dolphins. Paul, what's your prediction on this game?
I think, and this is one of the rare opportunities for this year, you're going to hear me say this, I think with Albert Wilson coming back, I think the fact that they're starting to use Kenyon Drake a little bit more, and I think the devastating mess that Washington is, I think Miami has a chance to pull this one out. I'm going to go 20-14 Miami.
I'm going to go 24-21 Redskins, with the reason being that sometimes when you fire your head coach, like they did with Jay Gruden, you get Case Keenum back in there, who really earned the starting job. And, really for the first 3 games, people were starting to talk about him a little bit. He has a way of surprising. But sometimes that placebo effect, like we saw a few years ago when Joe Philbin was fired and Dan Campbell came in and they destroyed the Titans and the Texans in the first 2 games. I think they're going to have a little bit of a resurgence here. And also in terms of matchups, they still do have a very talented front 7. And now Jonathan Allen's back and he's healthy for them. He missed the first couple of games of the year. Montez Sweat and Ryan Kerrigan off the edge, only 3 combined sacks this year, but very talented too. And they've obviously got a mismatch for whoever lines up at tackle for the Dolphins. So I think they end up pulling this one out 24-21. And that will do it for our breakdown of the Dolphins-Redskins matchup this weekend at Hard Rock Stadium. You can follow Paul and I on Facebook, Twitter, Spreaker, iTunes, YouTube, iHeartRadio, and on Spotify. Check out our merch store on the FinSide.threadless.com. And if it's not on the right side and it's not on the left side, it is on the FinSide. Solo D, take us home.
It ain't the left side or the right side, then it must be the FinSide. It ain't the left side or the right side, then it must be the FinSide.
Listen, Dolphins fans across the land all tuning in to see what